Hello there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening everybody. My name is Kevin May. I'm the Editor-in-Chief at PhocusWire. This episode of New Reality With is brought to you by Salesforce. Brands can harness the power of the Salesforce Customer 360 to deliver personalized experiences and build long-term traveler loyalty. Our huge thanks to them for supporting this one-to-one series of interviews with industry leaders, which brings me very nicely to say hello to Peter Kern. Thank you very much for joining us on New Reality with PhocusWire and Phocuswright. So a very brief introduction. I mean, Peter, you are the Vice Chairman and the recently installed CEO of Expedia Group, your position, as we say, that you took on in April this year. You've been involved as the Vice Chairman since 2018, and you were brought in by Barry Diller, who everybody knows, in December last year to oversee the business as it looked for a new CEO and a new CFO. So welcome, Peter, to our show, to our Zoom side chat. We're very grateful for you joining us fairly early in your day with me here in the UK. So thanks, Peter, for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so this is a question that I've been asking quite a lot of the people that we've had on this series and in one-to-one interviews in other formats that we've been doing. And it's a fairly kind of blunt question, really. I mean, what was the worst case scenario that the Expedia Group had or hadn't been planning for leading up to the point where we are now? I mean, in other words, had the organization envisaged something as quite as chaotic as what we're in now?
I would say definitely not. You know, I'm fairly new, as you say, so I don't have a long history of what is our disaster plans, et cetera. But I think it's safe to say that most of what we've had to deal with historically, and likewise with the rest of the industry, is, you know, a volcano happens and that disrupts travel somewhere. Possibly, you know, somewhere in the world, a war breaks out and there has to be restricted travel there. You know, a terrible weather event, hurricanes, things like that disrupt, you know, the day-to-day travel that most of us have dealt with. And I think that's what most of our supply partners and we were sort of normally prepared for, which is, a big set of cancellations in a place, a city, a country, a something. But, you know, I don't believe anybody was ready for effectively a world war where travel just stopped. You know, this happens to be a war against a virus, but where everybody stopped moving, and the sheer quantum of cancellations and travel issues and things that came up were just enormous. So I don't, you know, if anyone says they were prepared, I think they're lying.
Right.
And, you know, I would not claim that we were highly prepared. Our call volumes, our cancellation volumes, everything was, you know, off the charts, just like everybody else. And on top of that, we had, like everyone else, we had employees who couldn't get to work. We had call centers that we could not occupy because of local restrictions. We didn't necessarily have all the things wired with the notion of, like, someday this entire call center might have to be virtual. So does everybody have appropriate Wi-Fi, appropriate computers, appropriate everything else? You know, that those factors are different all over the world. So so we certainly didn't plan for it. I think we did a yeoman's work in pivoting to be, you know, to do what we could, the best we could, and we did some amazing work. And our people, both on the technology side and just on the sheer blunt force human side, did a ton of work to try to help our customers and our suppliers. But nobody could have been prepared, and I'm not going to claim it was awesome and everything went smoothly. It definitely was not.
Right. And I'm interested. I mean, your name was linked with the job fairly early on in the turn of the year. I mean, some might say sensible people, as this pandemic unfolded, would have thought, maybe I won't be so keen on taking this, but you decided to still do that, and you were officially announced in April. I mean, what was your thinking behind still taking on the job where I think many people would have forgiven you perhaps not for?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's a combination of a little bit of feeling a responsibility. You know, I had gotten involved with the company and the people. Mm-hmm. I knew we had a lot of hard things to get through. And I know that's a challenging time for any company to deal with new leadership. And while I hadn't been in place long and I was not known to many people throughout the company. I at least had familiarity with the leadership team. By then I had familiarity with the problems and the issues, and we were, it's sort of like the dam is breaking, and you say, you know what, let's let somebody else clean up what happens, or do you say, okay, I've got to lean in with everybody else and try to hold the dam? And then I would say on the other side, as a sort of more opportunistically, I felt like this would be a moment for real change. Our chairman and I felt like the company was due for some significant change, and in crises like this, where companies often have difficulty admitting they need to change. In a crisis, everybody, it's all for one and one for all, and everybody gets behind getting after it and making those changes. So it is, in an odd way, I wouldn't wish it on a company or a person or anybody, but in an odd way, we will gain some speed and momentum in how we change from the virus, because it's given us the room to just attack a lot more all at once, instead of, when things are pretty good, it's a lot harder to get people to buy into the change and buy into why you need to do certain things.
Tell me, if you can, Peter, I mean, what you said the word speed there. I mean, what was the speed in which some of the actions that you had to take, which they were taken? I mean, did you start unraveling things and working things out from mid-February? Did you wait until as we got into March?
Well, as I say, I think by mid-February, even January, we were thinking about how we wanted to reorient the company more generally. Putting COVID aside, we were all a little naive and thinking maybe it wouldn't bleed into the rest of the world in the same way, out of China, et cetera. We were already starting to push through some change. We felt like some structural, we had made some structural changes at the end of 19. We were pushing those through. We were looking at more. We were thinking about how to do it. But then once the virus became real, and obviously, the dominoes started falling and each country started shutting down, then it became a question of finances, making sure we had ample capital and doing the work we did in the capital markets. It became an amplification of our efforts to try to cut costs. Now, it was a lot of variable costs at that point. It was marketing. It was all the things you would do in a regular day that you don't have to do anymore. We started looking much more closely at managing our own cash and managing the day-to-day and things, the company honestly was not built to address. So it was a lot of new muscle for us. But as I say, great work was done across the board by our people in saving us or getting us through all of that. And then I think once we got out of the bottom of the trough, the worst of it, and felt comfortable and confident that we had all the capital we needed, et cetera, then we started focusing much more on okay, let's stop worrying about the next 10 minutes and let's think about what kind of company we want to be when we come out of this. And therefore, what changes can we accelerate that might have taken us a year to get through or 2 years to get through that we can now do in 3 months or 6 months and come out the other side of this in a wholly different place.
Now, in that kind of outbreak phase, if we can call it that, Peter, I mean, what were some of the conversations that you needed to have with, say, the hotel sector is one in particular that you have a unique, if not sometimes fraught relationship with hoteliers? I mean, some of the, what were some, just talk us through some of the kind of things that you had to do to either work alongside them, appease them around refunds and all that kind of thing. Because it hasn't been as smooth as I'm talking generally about intermediaries. It hasn't been quite a smooth process for some.
No, look, I think this was a very tough thing for all of us. It's very easy to sort of say, oh, the customer's always right and we have to take care of the customer. But we actually tried to take a much more balanced view and did take a much more balanced view than I think some of our competitors from the standpoint of, there's human beings on both sides of this. And this is tragic on both sides, whether you're a hotel owner or a customer who was planning to go on their honeymoon. Both things are terrible. So we tried to find balance. We tried to work with our hotel partners to say, we think the appropriate reaction is X. Maybe it's vouchers for these sorts of people, money back for these sorts of people, et cetera. We had our own views, but I think we worked pretty collaboratively to try to encourage our supply partners to do what we thought was the right thing a fair thing for customers. But we were not trying to be, we never said we're giving the customers all their money back and we're just never paying you all. We never said that. We tried to come up with something that was equitable and reasonable. And look, there are exception cases to everything. And you can imagine we have some customers who say, oh, I got a voucher to go to this hotel in Italy, but I was only going there for my niece's wedding and I'm never going to go there again. We have all these exception cases that are hard to deal with, which is what makes it still a challenging process. But I think we worked through it all fairly, which means not everybody was happy on either side. Right. I guess that's a compromise, right? And I'd like to think that we did right by our supply partners within the bounds of what we could do, and did the best we could for customers with the same construct.
And lastly, before we kind of move on to where we are now, I mean, you came in April, but obviously intrinsically involved in what was going on in March. I mean, you personally, as the new CEO of the organization, I mean, what kind of lessons did you learn about running a business during that particular phase, if any?
Well, I think we all learn a lot when things are hard or when things go wrong. That's been true my entire career. I'm sure that's true for most careers. I think probably just what I learned is, we have a highly resilient employee base who fought through some difficult things. I'm sure many people listening today are in similar places and fought through some terrible things. I think I learned that people, as I believed, but as soon as people could travel, they would want to travel again. We've seen that, as soon as there were openings, everybody couldn't wait to get out of their homes. And I think as far as the business goes, I think, we learned where some of the more tenuous pieces that were held together that, couldn't stand up to the pressure of the weight of something like the virus. And we learned where the stronger pieces were. And frankly, in a crisis, you get a crash course in what your company is doing. And so in a way, I was, maybe drinking from the fire hose, but the benefit of that is when it's over, you've drunk in a lot and you've seen a lot of what your company is about. So I think it was, again, I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't wish it on me or anybody else, but I think a lot of benefit will come from what we learned during this, what I learned during this, and what we can do in the future. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, you've probably learned more about the company in 12 weeks than would probably normally take 12 months, some might say.
Yeah. Sorry, you got a little quiet there. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think probably all our employees did. One of the things we were pushing for in our restructuring was sort of acting as one company. We've had a lot of brands, a lot of businesses that arguably were competing with each other in certain ways. And we got much more of a one company mentality out of this because, it's all for one and one for all. If we don't survive, it doesn't matter. And we started to fix things with that mindset. And we started to break down a lot of those historic beliefs of like, oh, I have to do my thing in my area and I don't want to mess with somebody else's area. And then we started to have to do it. And people saw what could come from that. And I think got really excited about it. So we're continuing to push on that.
Okay, so let's move on if we can then to our middle section of our chat, and that's just kind of what's happening now with the business. I mean, things are restarting, depending on what country you're talking about, in various degrees of success or otherwise. I mean, how does a brand the size of Expedia Group and its individual brands kind of think about restarting? And I'm talking specifically, I guess marketing is something that it gets so much focus with Expedia because, frankly, you spend so much on it. I mean, how do you start unraveling that and putting all the pieces together?
Well, I'd break that question into two parts. I think as far as we're attacking the whole marketing of it all, first of all, we've restructured our brands into one group. And for the first time that I can recall, we will be operating the brands in concert. And that goes for how we position those brands in the market, how we advertise them on TV and other places in video, how we do performance marketing, and how we buy across Meta and Google, et cetera. So we have just put those groups together, and they are forming their plots. So I don't have a lot to say about what those will exactly look like, but it is the first time that that instead of each brand looking out for its own wins and losses, we now have a company-wide view of what's optimal for the company. So that will be different for us. How it expresses itself over the next 3, 6 months, 2 years, whatever, will be evolving. As far as how we've addressed it generally, though, I'd say we've, like many of our competitors, when we all pulled out of marketing and out of the auctions, et cetera, we still all had business, right? Our brands have impact people. We have loyal customers. And so we had very nice, relatively profitable transactions because we weren't marketing and people were coming in still. Mm-hmm. As we start to wade back into the marketing of it all and the performance marketing, I said it on our last earnings, but our intent is to be much more cautious, not just, blow our brains out and throw ourselves back into the auctions and repeat historic mistakes. We want to be more careful and thoughtful. We think we can be more calculated and profitable across the enterprise. And we are going to go into the markets with that mindset. Doesn't mean we won't be spending up to the volumes of our old spend. I'm sure we will, but we think we can do it in a more calculated way. We think because we've cut costs and made ourselves more efficient in other ways that we can actually continue to drive growth in a more profitable way. But it's going to be noisy. You won't be able to tell a lot till the world comes back to some normal level. And frankly, we're not terribly worried. I'm not terribly worried about whether we made an extra $1 tomorrow, today, or not. I'm much more concerned, and I hopefully have the company focused on what do we want to look like in 6 months or 9 months or whatever when we're out of this thing, so that we can be optimally, profitable, successful at that point, as opposed to, did we remember to market in this little channel yesterday, and did we miss a transaction? I don't care if we miss one transaction here or there. We need to make more substantive change.
Right. I mean, your predecessor spoke about this quite a lot. The CEO of your biggest competitor talks about this quite a lot, and you've referenced it a little bit there in a very analytical way. But at a kind of conceptual level, I mean, Google is such an important part of what you've been doing in the strategy for customer acquisition. But it is something that has been talked about as something that needs to be changed, whether it's that relationship or its power. I mean, where do you sit on that as with particular reference to Google rather than the marketing mechanics that you've just talked about?
Yeah, well, I think there's two parts to it, right? There's the part that we sometimes take issue with about Google's power in the market and what that has looked like over time and whether we think that's right or wrong. And how they use that power. And there's the other part, which is, what are we doing to optimize our part of the equation? I don't believe in, you can only control what you can control. And what we can control is what we're doing. So, for example, we haven't done as much. While we have grown direct traffic well over time, we certainly could not be accused of being utterly focused, maniacally focused on it, right? Our apps could be better. Our post-booking experiences could be better. We could be stickier in lots of ways. And it's something we're keenly focused on and we're working on. And by doing that, if we got one more customer per 1,000 or 100 or whatever to become a direct customer, then every time we go back into the Google auction, we're a little bit better off. And so every time we do something that helps us, whether it's conversion, which I know everybody likes to talk about, but also just keeping direct traffic, creating that stronger relationship, being more profitable in every transaction. Like, those are the things we can control. And so we are focused on those as our tool to combat, the commoditization of Google and just having to go way back in all the time to replicate your traffic.
Talking of control, I mean, another relationship that is discussed a lot is that relationship between yourself and your suppliers. Do you sense that is going to evolve in this, to borrow from the title of this session, the new reality? Is that going to evolve in a different way, or do you think it's just going to remain the status quo, which might not be how some of your suppliers would want it to?
Look, I think we can do and have been trying to do more for our suppliers over the years. I think there tends to be this notion that it's a zero-sum game. If we get more, they get less, or vice versa. I don't think that's true. I think, we all know that the hotel and air supply business has been a complex spaghetti factory of rates and things all over the world in different places and things. I think we can do more to help. I think, one of our big focus points is we have more travel data than basically anybody in the world, but we have never really harnessed it sufficiently well, and actually never really had it in one place where we could manage it all in one simplified way. And we believe that the power of that data can help our suppliers, that we can help them perform better, that we can help them think about their marketplaces better, et cetera. But we've never really done that. It's always been just, what do we get? What do you get? What do we give you in supply or not? I think there's lots and lots of room for us to help our supply partners be stronger and better. We're highly involved right now in a plot to help, to help revive their businesses and help them how we can. We're working on our tools for our suppliers so they can be stronger and better tools, so that the suppliers know what actions they can do to help their business. And I think suppliers will readily want to work with us, I hope, given that, we all need to revive the marketplace. Customers will be looking for price comparison. They're very likely to be going to OTAs. And so I think we can do a lot to help them. I don't see why it should be anything other than a sensible, mutually beneficial relationship. And I think, we can all talk ourselves into the fact after, a 15-year bull market that we're all fighting for the last dollar or something. But the reality is we can do a lot to help each other come out of this. And that is our intent. So we will keep doing that.
Okay, we might have had some audio issues at my end here, but hopefully, can you still hear me now, Peter?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep. Okay,
perfect. So sorry about that if anyone was having some issues with the audio. As we kind of go into our last 10 minutes, if we may, let's talk a little bit more kind of big picture, Peter. I mean, there are suggestions that there are kind of three power players in this industry. There is yourselves, there's Trip.com Group, as we now need to call them, and Booking Holdings, and they have a fairly, and you and they have a fairly firm stranglehold, if that's the right word, on the way the market operates from a digital travel perspective. But there are those brands that are perhaps lurking on the outside, forever talking about Amazon and forever talking about what Airbnb might be able to achieve if it could scale up. I mean, what's your kind of point of view, Peter, if you can, on that kind of dynamic around having three very important players, maybe more, coming into the market? And indeed, does this new reality allow for another a player to come in?
Well, I think, other players can always come in. It wasn't that long ago that, Airbnb wasn't a thing. And now it's an enormous thing. I've invested in travel startups for years, and there's no shortage of them at any time, trying to disrupt all sorts of parts of the industry. So I certainly think there is opportunity for any number of people to come in, play in different parts of the market, compete with better products or other things. I think that's why we as a company need to not be afraid to continually try to reinvent ourselves and improve our products and do more, and make the customer experience better, et cetera. The reality is, I don't think that what's just happened is going to encourage some of those big bad names you put out there like Amazon or, even a Google or whatever to want to be in the travel business more. I think this has illustrated quite plainly how messy the travel business can be, and you have to have a stomach for it and a desire to be in the mess. So I don't think that will encourage any of the other giants to be more involved. They may, you never know if people are opportunistic. You never know what people do, but that's all been talked about for a long time, and nobody has really gone very far with it. So I think it's, we have 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, big players. We have the meta players. We've got Trip. We've got different people that play it differently. I think there's plenty of room for other startups to penetrate, and there are some clever things going on, whether it be in air disruption and other things. And I think it's a big, wide open market. I don't think, I think we have strength by scale, but we're certainly none of us in a position where others don't have ample chance to come into the market. So I think, we like our position. I mean, again, we're pretty internally focused right now. We think we have a lot of upside just by being better at what we do. And I think probably more than any of our competitors in that. And so that's what we're focused on. But I think the market, we should assume we will have competitors and more new competitors we don't know about yet. And we have to operate that way because every company that doesn't eventually gets overtaken by somebody, younger, more clever, more adventurous who comes in and blows stuff up. So we have to do that for ourselves.
I mean, in the classic kind of SWOT analysis, if we can just focus, because it's we're journalists, we like looking at the negative part. I mean, where is your biggest weakness? Where perhaps yourselves and other intermediaries, where perhaps you do have some, or there is opportunity for someone to come along and disrupt either the model or a particular part of it, whether it's rentals or air or something else.
Yeah, I don't think I would put it on the model. Like, there's nothing inherently weak or exposed. We have no exposed underbelly that I think the model creates. I think, I think our weaknesses were just, perhaps the momentum or entropy of scale, which is, you don't reinvent yourself. You think your product's good enough. You don't go far enough. You don't push to be better. You don't push to drive more. As I say, we were sort of stuck in our ways. We've broken a lot of those ways and consolidated our brands. We've consolidated our tech platform. We've consolidated our product and lines of business in different ways. We believe we're going to bring our data together to be much more powerful. And it all sort of comes from a perspective of we can do more with what we have than we have done. And if we don't innovate and stay at the forefront, others will. And so I don't think it's our relationship with our hotel suppliers is fraught, or our relationship with our air suppliers is fraught. I think it's a healthy, we'll always have issues, but it's a healthy, productive relationship for everybody. I think it's really just at the heart of what we can do for the customer, what we can do to innovate in travel. And I think we can do more. And by the way, apropos of the moment, I think we can do more to help underserved travelers, an area which we haven't done enough. To help travelers who have particular issues in the world, and there's more to do there. So I think, again, there's just, you have to stay at the front of these things and innovate, or somebody's, hungrier, younger, whatever, faster will try to steal your business. So we have to steal our own business. We have to reinvent ourselves.
And I've heard various people from Expedia Group over the years talking about the R&D efforts that you have, and certainly pre-COVID, there was always a substantial and a sizable investment in R&D. I mean, if you could solve a particular pain point yourself in the industry, or just give us your sense, Peter, what is still one of the biggest pain points going forward that the industry still needs to solve? I mean, the classic ones, people always talk about the airport experience, but is there that and perhaps another one that you still think this needs to be figured out?
Yeah, well, I think I think we're going a long way. We've invested a lot, for example, in our virtual assistant technology that we're deploying across our enterprise. It was hugely helpful during COVID, and we got super serious about deploying it more places faster, teaching the tools. And now we are doing that company-wide, essentially, to help on every front, whether it's with supply partners or customers or everything. I think things like that create a lot of opportunity to improve the experience for the customer or even the supplier. Help with make them feel better about the experience. Also more cost efficient, and so that's a big pain point. And I think the whole industry suffers from that, right? The service end is a expensive, arduous process, and the more we can do together, there's still a lot of fragmentation. There's still processes where we've got to, we get a call from a customer, and then we've got to call the supplier to get cleared to refund the money. There's a lot of friction-filled stuff in all of that. It's getting better, but that's, if you could wave a magic wand and it would all be seamless and great, the customer would be happier, we'd all be happier, we'd all make more money, that would be great. But that's, a very like plumbing-oriented idea. I think, I think on the front end, I think there's just, again, a lot more we can do for the consumer in terms of how we help them along the process. Personalization, I think, is a huge opportunity for us. Again, we have an enormous data advantage, which we think we can use there, and again, just make it easier for you to figure out where you want to go, where you want to stay, and help you along that path. I think there's friction in all the parts of that, and I would not claim that we are particularly great at any piece of it. We don't have the coolest itinerary or the best app pushes or the best whatever. Like, we can be better at all of those things, and I think we can be much better on that sort of merchandising side of things. We've been again clunky and slow around some of it, and there's a huge opportunity for us to be more targeted about. You live in London, you like to go to the Spanish coast. We know that about you. How can we help you when there's good opportunities or good sales or good other things? We haven't done enough around that. So there's a big future in that, I think. And
has there ever been any temptation? And I think this is something that's coming up a little bit now, the role of the human interaction, whether it's a sense of reassurance about getting traveling again, or, those kind of things. Has there been any temptation, do you think, to provide some kind of almost offline or home working or, get into that kind of thing? I know it's completely the antithesis to what an online travel company is all about, but there is a fair amount of talk about being a little bit more human, as it were.
Yeah, well, I think you can be a little bit more human without necessarily having a lot more human interaction. I would say, one of the things, when I took the job, I started getting emails from angry customers, and I'm sure somebody in my organization would have liked me to send my, some form response to them, but I wrote them back and I said, look, I'm really sorry. I know it's bad. We're trying really hard. But it's hard because our people can't get to the office and we can't get back to you, and we're trying. And 95% of them were very appreciative of that and felt like, okay, your company's like human. You can respond in human ways. You can whatever. So, and 5% still hated me, but that you can't please everybody. But I think, so I guess my point is, I think you can be more human in the sense of how you communicate, what you provide people with, how you help them along, but you can use technology to still be efficient about it. I think it's the difference between, understanding the humanity of the process. We've all traveled. We've all had problems when we travel. We all know what those look like. We all know how frustrating it is. We also know that by and large, there are many customers who don't like to talk to humans. If you look at NPS scores, good virtual agents often perform much better than humans because people get frustrated with humans, or they don't like asking as many questions, so they don't keep them on the line. Whereas if you're just dealing with a virtual thing, a chatbot or something, you're much more likely to keep asking questions. So I think technology can solve a lot of it. I don't think technology means inhumanity. I think you have to combine them and say, okay, what are the real problems? How do we help customers? Have that customer in mind. And where you need to have humans help them, you have to have humans help them. But very often, we would be more efficient. They would be done faster. They would get through their problem more quickly if they could just interact with good technology that got the work done. And they would be much happier. So I think you can be both.
And a very human issue that has obviously come to the fore, particularly in the last 6 weeks, but frankly has been around for the last 6 decades, and that is around diversity. Now, we at PhocusWire did a joint project with Expedia last August around gender diversity, but as we now know, because of Black Lives Matters, the issue around racial diversity is perhaps more important than ever. I mean, what do you sense is Expedia's role and your own role in covering so many of those particularly complex issues, whether it's around inclusion within the workplace, targeting consumers in a better way, in a more thoughtful and a more proactive way? What's your general kind of sense on that, if you can?
Yeah, well, listen, I think it's a huge problem that, you start by admitting you have a problem. And we certainly did. If you've seen any of my communications with the company, I did not shy from it. We are not in a great place when it comes to racial diversity. And we've done better with gender, but we still have a ways to go. Like many companies, and that's not an apology, but we did the right things. We sort of put people in places. We set up groups. We started to focus on it, but we haven't come nearly far enough, fast enough. And I think we all have to focus on it at a wholly different level. So now we call it inclusion and diversity. It reports to me. It will continue to report to me. I have been deeply steeped in it for the last month, meeting with all our employee groups that represent underrepresented groups and talking to them. I've been talking to our teams on the brand side about what more we can do to help travelers. I mentioned that earlier, and we're looking at that through several different lenses. I think we have to do the right thing, and we will do whatever we can to help drive the industry as well. But charity starts at home, and we've got to fix ourselves first. And we have a ways to go, and it won't take 10 minutes. And I've been very honest with everybody. We're going to publish our numbers to the employees. We're going to show them what's happening. We're not going to hide from it. And I've been honest with people that some things we can and should be doing right away, and some things will take time. But we will have a very robust activity around inclusion, around bias learning, around allyship. And remember, we're a global company, so the race question takes on many more axes as it goes across the world, whether it's places where ethnic minorities are treated in a certain way, or gender again comes out. LGBTQ is an issue, but LGBTQ plus is an issue in many countries in the world. So it's all of these things, and we have to have a global view of it. But clearly, the work starts in the U.S. first. It's the most immediate problem, and we will get out, and we are getting after it. But we take a global lens to it. We have to not exclude anybody in our process to not exclude anybody. We have to really make it thoughtful and global. So we're all in it. We are highly focused on it. I am highly focused on it. I think it has to be a priority of the senior most management, and I think. It's the right thing, and it's good for business. I think people, employees and customers want to do business with companies they think represent values they believe in. And I think we do, but we have to express it more clearly and show it and do the work.
And just very quickly, because we're coming up to time, I'm curious, very briefly, Peter, then, Expedia embarked on a fairly sizable new headquarters in Seattle, probably last year that started, and that's already is multi-million pound. Your chairman, Barry Diller, has talked about he wants everyone to go back to the office. How do you square that from a CEO's perspective from those that just frankly perhaps too scared to go back to the workplace when there's almost mixed messages there? How are you handling that?
I don't think they're mixed messages. I think there's this COVID time when there's lots of uncertainty, and we don't want people to do things they're going to be uncomfortable with that put them in any jeopardy. Been pretty clear with the company that even when we thought we had some false starts about opening some offices, we do have many of our offices open around the world, smaller offices. But in Seattle, for example, the county won't let us go to work unless you wear your mask the whole time, regardless of how many people are around you, how much space you have. And we just felt like our employees wouldn't want to work that way. So we gave them, so we didn't open the campus. But longer term, I believe in science. I believe we will conquer COVID one way or another. And we believe in, the great creativity and great work comes from people being together to do a lot of that. Is that 24/7, 7 days a week? Maybe not, but it's not this either. So we're thinking about the longer term impacts of flexible work, but I would say broadly defined, I agree with Barry that great work comes from being together and the serendipity of working in a place together. And we don't want to lose that, whether we can lose a little bit of it some of the time to make people's lives easier and other things, or help with cities and congestion, et cetera. Maybe we'll try to do some of that.
Okay. Many thanks again to Peter Kern of Expedia Group. I'm Kevin May. And of course, as I said earlier, this episode of New Reality was brought to you by Salesforce. As we noted earlier, you can harness the power of Salesforce Customer 360 to deliver personalized experiences and build long-term traveler loyalty. We'll actually put a link to where you can find out more on the article for this replay and on the YouTube version of this as well. So many thanks to them, and many thanks in particular to Peter. Thank you for joining us and your dizzying array of books behind you. I hope that you've read every single one and you can talk all about them.
I use my wife's books to make myself look good. So
okay. Well,
but thank you for the time, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Working very well. So thanks, Peter. Thanks to everyone else. Thanks to Salesforce. We'll see you next time.
Take care. Thanks.